On New Year's Day of 1971, Mary Brosley, a 33-year-old white woman with 2 children, became the first known victim of a man since recognized as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. Welcome to the Crafty Cryptid, a channel dedicated to DIY crafting and spooky storytelling. If you enjoy content about cryptids, conspiracies, and true crime, then subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell so that YouTube always alerts you whenever I make my bi-weekly posts. Today, we are going to take a look at the worst serial killer in U.S. history, Samuel Little, also known as the Choke and Stroke Killer. Born on June 7th of 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia, authorities believe Samuel Little may have been born in jail while his mother, who he described as a lady of the night, was serving time. According to Little, his mother was only a teenager when he was born, and she left him abandoned on the side of the road, though as far as my research goes, I have no idea if this is true. However, we do know that Little was raised mostly by his grandmother in Ohio, and it didn't take long for him to commit to a life of crime. When he was 13, he was caught stealing a bicycle, and at 16, he was sent to a juvenile detention center after being convicted of breaking and entering. After serving his time, Little dropped out of high school and moved to Florida with his mother. He became a competitive boxer, but he never stayed out of prison long. Little told a Texas Ranger in his 2018 confession that he had fantasized about killing women from a, quote, young age. He had even pinned an image of a woman being strangled to death on his wall, and even as young as 7 or 8 years old, he was already fantasizing about choking his teacher and murdering his classmates. By the age of 35, Little had been arrested a staggering 26 times, though his first murder supposedly didn't happen until 1971, and he wouldn't be convicted of it until decades later. At the time, Little was 31 years old and had met Mary Jo Brosley at a bar. She was, unfortunately, someone who would not be immediately missed, and Little knew that. Broadley had had a falling out with her family, had abandoned her children, and was caught between anorexia and alcoholism. Little knew that no one would be looking for her. When her body was eventually found 3 weeks later by a man and his son out hunting, she was buried in a shallow grave and had decayed beyond all recognition. She carried no ID. Police ran what remained of her fingerprints but found no matches, and the medical examiner incorrectly estimated that she was a woman between 50 and 60 years old who had been dead for months. Strangulation usually leaves behind physical evidence, but Samuel Little had been smart about the way he'd killed her. A person impaired by drugs or alcohol is easier to suffocate, and younger people have more flexible bones and cartilage, making them easier to strangle without breaking their bones. In Brosley's case, her body lay decomposing for weeks before it was discovered, and physical clues degraded. By the time they found her, Miami police were not sure that she had even been murdered. Her blood alcohol level was so high, right around 0.37, that it was possible she had simply dropped dead. If you don't realize how high that actually is, consider this. If you hit 0.08 on a breathalyzer, you're considered inebriated by the law. Brosley had 4.5 times that limit in her blood. This would be the first of 93 slayings that Samuel Little would get away with over the course of the next 4 decades. In 1974, Martha Cunningham, a 34-year-old black woman, disappeared from Knoxville, Tennessee, on her way to a New Year's Eve church service. When police eventually found her body, she was covered in bruises, her purse and jewelry were missing, and her underwear had been pulled down to her ankles. Despite signs of assault and theft, the autopsy ruled that there was, quote, no obvious cause of death, tried to blame Cunningham's seizures, and told the press that the death appeared to be from natural causes. In 1977, Mary Ann Jenkins, a 22-year-old black woman, was found deceased and naked other than her jewelry in Illinois, but the police concluded she had been killed in a lightning strike. The odds of being struck by lightning in a given year are 1 out of 1,222,000. The odds of being a victim of homicide are 6 out of 1,000, and yet the Illinois police decided that the most likely scenario for finding a naked woman outside and deceased was that she was struck by lightning. Being careful with who he chose as victims made it much easier for Little to get away with his crimes for so long. According to authorities, Little knew to go after the homeless, or prostitutes, or drug addicts. He avoided people who would be immediately missed, and went after victims that he knew the police would not look into very deeply. Little told authorities, quote, I'm not going to go over there into the white neighborhood and pick out a little teenage girl, unquote. Though some of his victims, like Mary Brosley, were white, 68 of the 93 women that Little is credited with killing were black. At least 3 were Hispanic, and 1 was Native American. What is perhaps most disturbing of all was Samuel Little's sick perspective on his murders. He referred to his victims as succulent fruits he could enjoy without penalty. Quote, I go back to the same city sometimes and pluck me another grape. How many grapes you all got on the vine here? Unquote, he told the Post. In 2019, he said in an interview, quote, they was broke and homeless and they walked right into my spider web, unquote. While in jail during one of his 26 arrests, Little learned how to draw and paint. He would use this skill to create disturbingly beautiful portraits of the women he murdered. He was said to have a perfect memory, recalling every detail of their faces and bodies in his works. It was these portraits that police would use to finally start solving the cold cases decades after they had begun. In 2018, James Holland, a Texas Ranger who had begun looking into Samuel Little, contacted a Miami detective named David Denmark about women that Little confessed to strangling in South Florida. Miami police scoured their records and came up with 2 that matched. One was a white woman, mentally disabled, and a sex worker named Angela Chapman. The other was Mary Jo Brosley. Thus began the confusing and frustrating interview with Samuel Little, the choke and stroke killer. Over the course of the next 2 years, Samuel Little's confessions, paintings, and perfect recall would help police solve decades-old murder cases. In October of 2019, the FBI identified Little as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history, with 93 confessed victims, more than Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer combined. At the very end of 2020, Samuel Little died in prison and is now subject to his eternal punishment. For the families of the women he murdered, they will have to continue holding the knowledge of their loved ones' final moments forever. Though I could not find the names of all 93 victims, mostly because some of them have still not been confirmed by police, I do want to share the haunting sketches that Little composed of his victims. Let's remember the women who were forgotten by society, the women who didn't matter to the authorities, the women that are still missed by their loved ones today. I'm glad you joined me today. If you learned something, click subscribe and ding the notification bell so that you'll always be updated when I post my bi-weekly videos. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and come back soon, Cryptids.